So this Tuesday, November 11th, Wizards of the Coast will be releasing two books published in the Forgotten Realms setting since the release of their 2024 core rulebooks. The first one is the Forgotten Realms Heroes of Faerun, which is specifically a player expansion book. So this is a good one if you are a player or want to provide your players options. And the second book is the Forgotten Realms Adventures in Faerun, which is more for dungeon masters. Now, as a big fan of this setting, I make sure to get these books as soon as possible. So I order this through my local game store, which I was lucky enough to get the alt cover and to get it early because my game store is actually part of the Wizards Play network. Now, Heroes in Faerun offers new and updated subclass options for your characters, as well as brand new backgrounds and feeds that's all tied into the world of Forgotten Realms. Now, this book also offers a lot more content in here beyond that, like lore about the different species in the core setting, a guide to life in Faerun, the deities, new items, magic, which they introduce a new mechanic called circle magic in here, and information about factions as well too. Now, I could do a deep dive on this, but because I like to have a specific lens about the Barbarian class, I'm going to talk to you today about the different kinds of options in here that is available for you as a player and which one is the best option to choose as a Barbarian. First, let's talk about subclass options for Barbarians. Unfortunately, unlike its predecessor, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide that had a subclass option for Barbarians and an updated one as well too, the Heroes of Faerun book does not offer any subclass options for Barbarians. So we're not getting anything new when it comes to subclass, unfortunately. Now, not to go on a tangent here, but me personally, I was a bit disappointed not to see a Barbarian subclass in here for a number of reasons, but one of them is that the famous Barbarian from Baldur's Gate 3, Karlach, is featured in not just Heroes of Faerun, but the Adventures in Faerun books. And for us to not get a subclass for our favorite Barbarian is a little bit of a disappointment for me personally. I absolutely love Barbarians. I adore Karlach as a character. My favorite subclass is Path of the Giant, so I was hoping that maybe it would get an update in the 2024 version of the Barbarian class and that maybe it would have showed up in this book. Just because I was hoping for that doesn't mean that there was anything wrong with not having it. It's just a personal disappointment that I was hoping to get something for the Barbarian when it comes to subclass options in the Forgotten Realms book. But I have noticed that since the publication of the 2024 core rulebooks, we've had a number of Unearthed Arcana playtests drop. And with the exception of the most recent playtest, none of them included Barbarian subclasses. Now, the one that did get released on October 30th, very recently here, did include two subclass options for playtesting for Barbarians, but those two are two that are already in existence in the 2014 core rules, so these are just ones that are getting tweaked and updated. In the future, I would love to see brand new subclasses for the Barbarian class. I think that is desperately needed. I also think that Path of the Giant needs to be updated, especially with some of the features that kind of got negated with the new Barbarian features, but I'm hoping that we just see more material for Barbarians in the form of subclasses because I think it'd be really cool to see what else we can do with these new rules. Okay, so now that I've ended my rant about the lack of subclass options for Barbarians, let's talk about backgrounds in the Heroes of Faerun book. Now, if you're not familiar with how backgrounds works now in 2024 rules, they've been adapted and changed to have two significant differences from 2014. First of all, backgrounds are where you get your ability score increases from, so it gives you certain ability scores that you can increase when you take that background versus what they did before, which was originally tied to your species. And everybody gets an origin feat, which is what you would get when you get to level 4, 8, 12, and 16, like a new ability that you can do. But now everybody starts with a new origin feat when you pick your background. So the backgrounds in the Heroes of Faerun book are all brand new that's tied to the land and the world of Faerun. So if you're playing a Barbarian, these are probably the best backgrounds to pick from the Heroes of Faerun source book. Now, this might not be the first choice for a lot of people when they're looking through the options and thinking about what background they want to pick for their Barbarian, but my favorite one and probably my number one choice is the Rashimi Wanderer. Now, if you're not familiar with what Rashomon is, I highly encourage you to read up on it. You can actually read about it in the Heroes of Faerun book where they have a section about Rashomon, or you can look it up on the Forgotten Realms wiki. They have a really cool history and story that has strong connections to magic, to Barbarians, to the Red Wizards of Thay. It's really, really fantastic. Plus, your favorite ranger Minsk is from Rashomon as well too. So if you're not familiar with it, definitely check up on it. But now we have a background that's tied to that land, Rashomon. By the way, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that word correctly. So if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, please let me know. But I'm just going to call it Rashomon from now on. At least I'm not calling it ramen. With the Rashimi Wonder background, you can increase either your strength, your constitution, or your charisma ability score. You gain the origin feat tough, which increases your hit points, and you gain proficiencies in the skills of intimidation and perception, which allows you and frees you up to pick other skill proficiencies from your barbarian class. So this is a really good option for your barbarian for sure. The next background that's really good is the Zentarum Mercenary. Now, this might be another one that people don't think is necessarily the first choice for Barbarian, but hear me out on this. First of all, the ability scores that you can increase are Strength, Dexterity, and Charisma, which again, Strength and Dexterity are very helpful for Barbarians. And just like the Rashimi Wanderer, you get proficiency in Intimidation and Perception as well too. Plus, this background gives you proficiency in Forgery Kit, which I think is really interesting and a lot of great opportunities for roleplay that you can do interesting things with the Barbarian beyond the usual combat and violence. So this is actually something that could be really interesting to use for character development. But it's the origin feat that comes with this background, Zentarum Ruffian, that really makes it interesting for your Barbarian, which I'll talk about that origin feat later. Next up is the Ice Fisher background, which technically speaking is probably the most optimal choice for Barbarian because you can increase your strength, your dexterity, or your constitution ability score, which is all three things that you are interested in as a Barbarian. And you also get the Alert feat, which allows you to add your proficiency bonus to your initiative rolls, and you can swap places in initiative with an willing ally as well too, which is huge for a Barbarian because it allows you to be a little bit more strategic with other people at your table. My only problem with this, and this is a personal preference, is that I hate fishing and I don't like the idea of ice fishers. It kind of, again, locks you into a specific kind of way of playing your character. So if you want to have those things, you have to come up with a story that's tied to ice fishing. Now, you can definitely reflavor it and still use those ability score increases, get that origin feat, all those things, and reflavor it. That's always free, right? But then you still have the problem that the equipment that the background comes with is still tied to fishing, like bait and tackle and stuff like that. So it definitely is optimal for the mechanics that you get with it, but in terms of the story, for me personally at least, it's not interesting and it's not really flexible in a whole lot of ways. But if you don't mind that, if you like ice fishing and can work that into your character story, then this is a great option for your Barbarian. And the last background that's very beneficial for Barbarians is the Flaming Fist Mercenary. Now, I have to include this in here because this is pretty much the Rashimi Wanderer. You get the same ability score increases for strength, constitution, and charisma. You get the same origin alert, tough. You even get the same skill proficiencies with intimidation and perception. The only differences are that you get a different tool proficiency with Flaming Fist Mercenary, which gives you smith tools versus cartography tools from the Rashimi Wanderer. And the equipment is different as well too. Plus, the background itself in terms of flavor is very different. Where Flaming Fist Mercenary, you from Baldur's Gate, you are from an urban area, you're a hired muscle, whereas Rashimi Wanderer is more of a rural, kind of outlander type of lifestyle as well too. So the flavor and the minute differences of the equipment and tool proficiency is different, but everything else is essentially the same as the Rashimi Wanderer. Okay, next let's talk about feats and the heroes of Faerun that you can pick for your Barbarian. Now, feats are categorized into four different categories. You got origin feats, which is something that you get as part of your background, but you can also like to pick up that feat later in character development. You got general feats, which you usually pick as an option in your character development or character leveling up option at level 4, 8, 12, and 16. You have your fighting style feats, which you need to have the fighting style feature, usually through fighter or ranger or paladin or some other way of getting the fighter style feat. And there's epic boons, which you usually get as like this huge ability that you are able to do at level 19. And so Heroes of Faerun offers new types of feats that are brand new to the world of Dungeons and Dragons. And these are the ones I think are great for Barbarians. And this is in no particular order whatsoever. Now, I've said this was in no order, but actually, this one I'm going to share with you is probably one of my favorite ones of all the feats I'm going to list here. And this was the one I was talking about earlier when I was discussing Zentara Mercenary, and that is the origin feat of Zentarian Ruffian. Now, you get this as part of the Zentarian Mercenary background, so you can pick this up later in character level development. But the thing that you have to be mindful of is that if you decide to pick this up later as opposed to part of your background with Zentarian Mercenary, you do not get to increase any of your skills by picking up this feat, because origin feats do not allow you to increase specific ability scores by the nature of it being something that you pick up at the very beginning of your character level 1. But this is still a great option for barbarians. Zentarum Ruffian gives you what's called exploit opening, which is essentially savage attacker for opportunity attacks. When you make an opportunity attack and you hit, you get to roll twice the amount of damage dice and pick the higher result to apply to that opportunity attack. So yes, it's very specific, but if you pair that with like a savage attacker later on, that is a really cool way to be able to make sure that you are maximizing your damage output every single time. You also get something called Family First, which sounds like something Vin Diesel would come up with. But Family First says that if you roll initiative and you have heroic inspiration that you haven't used yet, you can expend that inspiration and give everybody in your party, including yourself, advantage on their initiative roll. Now, at some point, you won't need that as a barbarian because you will get advantage on your initiative rolls, but it's really cool to be able to help your party members by giving them advantage on their initiative rolls as well, too. Next up is Purple Dragon Commandant, which is a general feat that you can pick up later in the character development. This allows you to increase either your strength or dexterity score by 1. You can use a bonus action to give an ally temporary hit points equals to 2d6 plus the ability modifier that you increase by gaining this feat, which you can only do a number of times that equals to your proficiency bonus per long rest. And when you become bloodied, meaning that if you have 50% or less hit points, then all your attack rolls are done with advantage. So you no longer have to rely on reckless attack to get advantage on your attack rolls, which means that unless enemies have a source of advantage against you somehow, they are no longer attacking you with advantage because you're not opting into reckless attack unless you do for a specific reason like using brutal strike. And when you pair this with another feat that I'm going to talk about here in a minute, that shows that your barbarian, when they're at bloodied, are very scary and very hard to kill, which is going to be amazing. Next feat is Dragon's Guard, which is a general feat. This allows you to increase either your Constitution or Charisma score by 1, and you gain resistance to one specific damage type of your choice between acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison damage. So when you're raging, you already have resistance to any physical damage, plus you get to have resistance to another type of damage that you didn't have before. Additionally, you can use a bonus action with this feature to do what's called Dragon's Terror, which is basically you trying to cause somebody to gain the frightened condition until the end of your next turn. Now, the only downside to taking this feat is that it does require you to have Cult of the Dragon Initiate feat in order to be eligible for this, and you have to have a decent wisdom score in order for your Dragon Terror to have any sort of chance of being useful, because it does include your wisdom score as part of the difficulty class for the saving throw that the enemies have to succeed against. Next up is Boon of Desperate Resilience, which when it is paired with the Purple Dragon Commandant, this makes your barbarian scary. You increase either your strength or constitution score by 1, and you have resistance to all damage type except force when you are bloodied. So imagine your barbarian being bloodied. Now they have advantage against all attack rolls without having to do reckless attack, which makes them harder to hit. And now they're resistance to every damage type except for force, which is also making you difficult to kill. So comparing and combining those two feats are really cool for your barbarian. Assuming you ever make it to level 19, that is. And the last epic boon feat that might be useful and interesting for your barbarian is Boon of the Soul Drinker, which is a little bit of a disturbing name, but you get to increase any ability score by 1. You gain resistance to necrotic and cold damage, and you get to use a reaction whenever you see an enemy reduced to 0 hit points within 120 feet of you to gain 50 hit points. Now, you can only use this feature once per short rest or long rest, but this is a really cool epic boon to have as well too for your Barbarian. So as you can see, there are a lot of great backgrounds and feat options for your Barbarian in the latest book, Forgotten Realms, Heroes of Faerun. I'm already planning on creating a Barbarian character using some of this source material. In fact, for a actual play campaign that I'll be playing here in the near future. So I'm very excited about coming up with a new character that's really centered in the Forgotten Realms and grounded in that as well too, especially with a lot of the new things that we haven't had before. So let me know which backgrounds and feats that you're excited about, whether it's for your Barbarian or for a different character class. And let's have a conversation about all these things because I'm really excited to see what you're going to build and what you're going to play in the Forgotten Realms. So don't forget, as always, to go reckless and go home. Unless you have the Purple Dragon Commandant feat and you're bloodied. Take care.